In December, the Office of National Statistics, or ONS, published their latest research into who the UK does trade with. If you want to check out the full document, the link's in the description. So in a world of uncertainty surrounding Brexit, who does the UK actually do the most trade with? Okay, before we dive in, let's go over some basic stats about UK trade. This graph shows the trend of UK trade since 1999. As you can see, the UK has reached peak levels for both imports and exports in 2016, the most recent year fully reported by the ONS. You will also notice that the UK's level of imports being consistently higher than the level of exports. This means that the UK is operating at an overall trade deficit, importing more goods and services than they export. In 2016, the UK exported £547.5 billion worth of goods and services, while importing £590.5 billion worth. The difference between imports and exports varies between countries. Some countries the UK has a trade surplus with, meaning the UK exports more than it imports. In other countries the opposite is true, and the UK imports more than it exports. In a lot of countries the difference isn't a major amount of money. However, that isn't true for all nations. The biggest trade deficit the UK has is with Germany. The UK imports £75.1 billion worth of goods and services from Germany, while only exporting £49.1 billion worth. On the other side of things, the UK has a fairly large trade surplus with the US. This means the UK exports £99.5 billion worth of goods and services to the US, while importing £66.3 billion worth. The UK exports a lot of goods to the US as part of the so-called special relationship between the nations. The value of this relationship is actually increasing. Between 2011 and 2016, UK exports to the US rose by 26%. In the same time span, exports to the EU fell by 3%. Despite this, a lot of the UK's goods and services end up in the EU. The UK exports 48% of its goods to the EU. As the UK is currently a member of the EU, all of these goods travel tariff-free throughout the EU. However, with Brexit mere months away, this is all likely to change very soon. When you combine goods and services together, 43% of the UK's exports go to the EU, which is also down on previous years. It's fallen from 54% back in 2000. The top EU countries the UK exports its goods and services to are in order: Germany, France, the Netherlands, Ireland and Italy. If you zoom that out to a global scale, the top 10 countries the UK exports goods to are the United States, Germany, France, Netherlands, Ireland, Italy, the residual Gulf Arabian countries which the ONS defines as Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, the UAE and Yemen, followed by China, Belgium and Spain. Okay, so let's talk about imports. The UK imports a ton of goods and services, £590.5 billion worth to be precise. So where are all those imports coming from? 53.8% of the UK's imports come from the EU, worth £318 billion. The top EU nations the UK imports goods and services from are, in order, Germany, Netherlands, France, Spain and Belgium. Again, if we take that out and look at the entire world, the top 10 countries the UK imports from are Germany, the United States, China, the Netherlands, France, Spain, Belgium, Italy, Ireland, and then in joint 10th, Poland and Japan. If you think a lot of those nations sound familiar, you'd be right. If you compare the top nations the UK imports and exports from, you'll notice a lot of repetition. In fact, 9 of the nations appear on both lists. The other thing you might notice is that the majority of countries on both lists are EU nations. This isn't a major surprise. Beyond even the EU trade laws which encourage trade, the UK generally has much stronger ties to countries geographically closer to it. For example, the UK trades more with Ireland than it does with Spain or Italy, despite the fact that Ireland's economy is smaller. This makes what happens post-Brexit even more interesting. If the UK fails to get a good deal with the EU, then trade with the 27-nation bloc will become a lot harder. This not only damages the UK's relationships with some of its closest trading partners, but also doesn't leave many nearby countries for the UK to trade with. There are a lot of implications of the UK leaving the EU without a new trade deal, and that's actually something we discuss in another one of our videos. Also, if you want to find out what will happen to Britain after Brexit, check out the videos in our Explaining Brexit series. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe.